Okay, welcome everybody to the March PPGC webinar, and our guest today is Aaron Turner. I think we're going to have a special webinar, saying hi. Before I pass the mic to Aaron, I'm going just to do a quick introduction. And basically, Aaron started learning about the three principles about 20 years ago, and he's been involved professionally with them for about 14 years. During which 10 years of those he spent with George and Linda in Laconor and Pronsky and Associates. He decided to come back to England in 2010 and he started up One Thought and the One Thought Institute. So he's now based in the UK. He works mainly with businesses and he's also trained practitioner through the One Thought Institute. He's also on the board of the Free PGC, and the One Thought Institute is one of the organizations behind the UK Free Principle Conference. That is a yearly event that's growing and growing and growing every year. So now, without any further ado, I pass the mic to Aaron.
Well, hi, and good afternoon, good morning, everybody. I see one of the people that I learned for is here, Dickon. It's really good to see you here, Dickon. You know, I noticed it's a fairly small group. We have 13 people. So as I said before we started, if people have questions, it would be good to know what they are so that we can have a bit more of a dialogue. So I have one question so far that I'm going to read out from Nicola. I hear so much about slowing down to be able to listen well and to allow mind some space to come through. I have listened to George's Busy Mind audio so many times and I really see the benefits but can't work out how. Any tips? Yeah, I got some tips. So that's one question to factor in. Is there anything that people would like to hear about or have a question about at this stage? Just let me know and I will factor it in.
Can I just say to people how they can let us know if they have a question?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
You can, normally you should have a tab called Q&A. That's one way of doing it. You can also send us a chat directly, or towards the top bottom right corner of your screen, you should have a little icon with a hand in it. If you click on that, it will raise the hand and I can then unmute you and we can talk directly, if that's okay. I hope this is clear.
Yeah. Nicola put her hand. So, yeah, what I wanted to talk about, really what I wanted to do was to put my understanding of the principles such as it is at your disposal. And I guess the key thing that I've learned over the years is the more I've learned, the more I've realized that we're talking about an understanding of what lies behind the human condition. We're talking about what you call a truth. And because we're talking about a truth, the reason it's useful is because it's not such a self-evident truth. It's a truth that you're feeling all day, every day. But it's not something that's obvious, and that's because of mind, consciousness, and thought. That we're talking about life being the manifestation of an energy that we are essentially both are and are experiencing, and that everything that exists comes from that energy, and everything that you need is in that energy. So you are everything you could possibly want, plus everything, plus the potential for everything you don't want. And that you can easily look at that as a challenge, or you can look at it as a fact. And what's interesting is when I first started learning about this, I don't know if this was the obvious to Dickon, is I started experiencing that I could have wildly different experiences of life. Like I could have an anxious experience, a self-conscious experience, a confident experience, an experience where I was an incapable, like a stammering wreck, an experience where I kind of had perfect intelligence and responsiveness at my fingertips. And I could have all those different experiences without anything changing, because what I understood at that time was thought was creating my experience. And the clearer the thought, the better the thought, the better it felt, and the better it worked. And I thought that this is the wrong word, but I kind of thought that it was a little bit like a toolbox. You know, that I could use, and this is true in some ways, but I could use this more or less effectively. So if I wanted to use it badly, I could be busy-minded, or I could worry, or I could, you know, indulge my anger, or my insecurity, or my depression, or my self-consciousness. But if I really wanted to do good, be good, then I would have to look for something else. Like I'd have to have a different kind of thinking. And that this was something that I could see was up to me, but I thought it was up to me to do it. And I can totally relate to Nicola's question, because I was interested in how do I quiet my mind? How do I get more wisdom? How do I listen better? And through observation, it started to dawn on me that that wasn't really a very accurate understanding of it. That things that are true are not variable, they're constant. And one of the things that I discovered was, I am a clear mind. Like, mind is a clear mind. You know, mind doesn't change. The nature of mind doesn't change. Our experience of it changes through thought, but thought is the way it appears, not the way it is. The way we feel it, the way we see the results of it. It's the picture it creates, not what's creating the picture. And what's creating the picture is always there. So I used to think when I got more and less connection to wisdom, rather than, no, you're experiencing it all the time. It's just, it's more formulated or camouflaged or, I don't know, developed or processed, or I don't know how, but it's not anything different. And what's interesting about this is, on the one hand, it's completely unuseful, because you're saying it's a complete constant. And on the other hand, it completely changes your orientation. If you think you're in control of mind, it places a responsibility on you, and you've got to figure something out. If it's a constant and there's nothing you can do about it, and that you're experiencing it through thought, but that's not changing anything, then there's nothing you need to do. And the confidence that comes from knowing there's nothing you need to do allows people to feel entitled to not worry, or to not listen to their worry. Because let's say worry is just a thought, not worry. It's not have to listen to your worry, because worry is not true. It's an experience of truth in the form of worry, as if there's a good reason to worry. But really, clarity of mind is a constant, which means your mind is already listening. How many times have you been in a conversation, been somewhat flustered in your mind, not really knowing what's happened, and a day later something you didn't know you heard popped in? Or you leave the house and something you didn't know you didn't do pops in. So your mind is already in action. There's nothing a person needs to do to listen. They can be more or less aware of that, so they're more or less confident in it, but they can't change the nature of mind. I was at an office a couple of weeks ago, and someone in the office was new there, and they were quite overwhelmed. I said, well, how's it going? They said, oh, God, I hope I get my head around this at some point. And I thought, that's really funny. I would be shocked if you met someone who was in an environment that they didn't come to understand and get acclimatized to. It's hard to imagine. So I said that to her. Oh, that's a nice way of looking at it. I said, well, seems to me it's just an observation. Oh, yeah, I suppose you're true. But because through the workings of thought, you can have any reality, no matter how founded in truth or not founded in truth. You can worry that something that's bound to happen is not going to happen. And that gets you following something that's not true, you know, and trying to do stuff that you don't need to do because you already have it. You know, so a lot of times we talk about the principles as if we're something separate. But really, we're saying that the principles describes reality, which means that we are that. We're that same energy, experiencing that same energy that's not changing in any way, but it's through the power of thought, we're able to have all these different experiences of a external reality. I kind of feel like maybe this has been a little general, so I want to. Oh, here we go. I got some other questions.
I have also a question on chat, Aaron, if you want me to open the mic to people.
Yeah, let me read these two questions and then. Okay, great. Okay. Great. Can I read a question?
Yes.
Oh, look. Okay, great. Brilliant. So here's some questions. Does all thought come from mind, both personal thought and creative, intuitive wisdom type thought? And someone else says, can you talk about how to handle thoughts that are classified as obsessive compulsive thoughts, meaning they're in a loop, taking into account that your thoughts create your reality, then when the thought content feels awful and real, this itself perpetuates the fear factor, which is really claiming a lot of attention. Brilliant question. And then we'll go to a chat. One of the reasons why I wanted to call this back to basics is because I think when we understand the principles, our understanding is not. We get understanding in insight, and insight gives us a thought-created realization of a truth. But it rarely, maybe it never does encompass that whole truth. So going back to basics means going back to the drawing board in your understanding all the time. So all the times I've gotten stuck in my understanding, it's because I've had an insight that came in the form of a thought, and I treated that thought as if it was the principles, and I got stuck in a limited version rather than realizing I got a glimpse of it, but that's not it. That's not all of it. It's richer than that. It's richer than any insight that you can have, which is hard to imagine sometimes because people have very rich insight. Lots of times people are blown away by their insight. But because it comes in the form of a thought, it's not going to encapsulate the whole truth. Which is why people like Dickon and George and Linda and Chip and Elsie and all the people that we've learned from have been involved in this for 40 years, 30 years, 40 years, and you can see that they're learning more now than they were when they started. That's true for me. I'm learning more now than I was before because I can see that everything I've learned is just a glimpse, a thought-contained glimpse of something much bigger. You know, it's like when you shine a torch around a room, you only see what's in the beam of the torch, and it's all part of the room. But but it doesn't mean that when you turn on the light, you won't see a lot more that you didn't see because your torch didn't go on it, right? So that's like thought creates your reality. Thought creates your reality because as soon as thought formulates, we feel it. We feel it, we see it, it feels like we can touch it. We don't see anything beyond it. So anything that's in your thought, whether it's real or not, does not exist, right? So I took my son on a ride at Disney a few years ago, and it was the funniest thing because it was a Star Wars ride. But when you got to the ride, it was just a giant crate that said Star Wars on it. You know, I was like, oh, this is bogus. You know, this doesn't look like Star Wars. It looks like a shipping crate. And then when you got inside, it just looked like a little cinema with a few chairs and a screen, and I'm struggling to see what's so Star Wars about it, right? And then the music starts, and then the screen goes on, and the crate starts moving about, moving about like that. And my son is absolutely terrified. And you can see in his mind, the reality that we saw walking in is gone. The idea that we're in Disneyland, that we're on a crate that had no wings, that was bolted to the ground, that had a bogus staircase, that is just a cinema with a screen in front of it is gone. That reality is gone, doesn't exist for him. And he's petrified, and he's saying to me, we've got to get out of here, I've got to get out of here, I've got to get out of here, right? That's an example of the way thought works, is it creates a reality in which no other realities exist for you at that moment, right? But this is where truth is interesting. You can be more or less aware that that's true. Thought creates a sensational reality for you, but you can be more or less aware that that reality can never be true. And as your awareness that that reality is just thought, just a creation of the mind, it's just an illusion, increases, your fear of it goes down even when you feel frightened. Because you know, despite what it feels like, it's just a thought-created reality. So it does sound like once you have the thought, you have the reality, there's nothing you can do. But people don't realize that that reality has no power. It's just a creation of an experience. And that experience, Sid used to call it neutral. It's neutral. So you are not that experience, even though you're having that experience. So you realize you have a certain freedom. You're the entity experiencing the reality, but it isn't actually real, and you can know that. And to the degree that you know that, your actual fear of it goes down. So even when you're frightened, you're not necessarily intimidated. So my son, when he gets angry, he threatens. And it used to be quite intimidating because I wasn't sure whether he'd act on the threat. And I can see that he doesn't. He doesn't actually want to hurt anybody, even when he's really angry. And that means even when he's threatening, he's less intimidating. And thought can create a reality that you experience through consciousness, but it can't change reality. Reality is there's an energy, a singular energy coming into experience through thought, coming into form through thought. But the reality never changes. So you're safe, even though you don't feel safe. The thought doesn't have power, even though it feels like it has power. And that's the illusory nature of experience. And that's why, but seeing that as a reality helps you. Telling yourself it's that way doesn't really help. Like, there's no boogeyman. There's no boogeyman. That doesn't really help if you think there's a boogeyman. Right? And I just want you to see that, because it is true that thought can be terrifying, but it's also true it can never be real. The reality never changes. We're all mind in disguise. That never changes. That never changes. That's not going to change. And it feels like there's something to worry about. But that can only be illusion, because we're only experiencing thought. There's no actual blade on it. It's all virtual. It's all illusory. It's all feeling. And feeling is just energy. And thought changes the way that energy feels. But it doesn't change the fact that it is just energy. And it's the same when you're asleep. You're experiencing energy in a form called dreaming, as it is when you're awake. And taking a look at that and considering that that might be true, not it might make you feel better, it might be true. And as you start to see that it's true, it makes less sense to be frightened of your thinking, no matter what it might be. So you go from, oh, what do I do about this thinking, to, well, bring on thinking. I mean, energy is a constant. I am experiencing energy as a constant. None of it's really real in the form that I'm experiencing it. It's all the same energy of being alive. It's not going to do anything for me other than give me this experience. So bring it on. I don't know, you know what it'd be like? It'd be like being able to eat anything and not get fat. Then you wouldn't have to choose anything on the menu. You could just eat it all. I'll have it all. You can have any thought and it won't change you. You know, it's that freedom that people realize, oh, only I could eat everything and not get fat. Well, in the mental realm, you totally can. You could have any thought and not be changed by it. If you know it's just thought. And that's where the ability to be frightened, but know it's just an experience, that there's no any additional meaning it has is made up. And you can make all sorts of meaning up, but as long as you know you're making it up, it doesn't have any significance other than you're alive, you're experiencing energy, and it's taking form through thought, and that means it fluctuates, it varies, it goes all over the place. So I talked to somebody yesterday, or was it the day before, who was struggling with OCD. And in everything they said, you could see it was the fear of the anxiety that led to the behavior. The desperate desire to manage the anxiety. And I used to hate anxiety too, because I thought it was different from other feelings. And I had plenty of feelings in my life that I didn't care about. You know, like some people, I'll turn up in a hat and scarf, and they'll say, oh, you cold? I'm like, well, no, I just don't want to be cold. And they'll say, well, I don't really care if I'm cold. Right? Everybody has feelings they don't really care about. And you can have that relationship to any feeling because none of them are real. We arbitrarily pick some out and not others. So that's my answer. That's my answer to that. The mind one is really interesting. I used to think that thought came from mind. And I often talk about thought coming from mind. But a better way to describe it is thought is mind. Thought is mind, moment to moment to moment. Thought is the way we experience mind. Right? So very clear thought is a very clear experience of mind, is a very clear consciousness, is a very expanded consciousness. Very limited thought is a limited experience of mind, is a limited consciousness, but it's all mind. It's all mind. It's all the intelligence of everything. That's not changing. The way we feel it, the form in which we feel it changes. And different forms feel different, right? So personal thought, you can look at this two ways. Personal thought is a kind of thought. It's not a kind of mind. There's only one mind. There's only one intelligence. There's only one energy behind that, which is why no matter where you look in life, you see it. If you look in biology, if you look in botany, if you look in ecology, if you look in cosmology, everywhere you look, you're going to see an intelligence at work that doesn't come down to the individual piece. It's in the fabric of existence. That's the way it looks to me. And it's in everything, right? So personal thought is just a kind of thought that leads to a kind of consciousness, right? Thinking is just a use of thought. Not a kind of thought, it's a use of thought. It's a personal use of thought. So, I don't know if you can hear that in the background. I thought it was a thicker dog. Yeah, and wisdom and intuition are experiences of an expanded consciousness, a clearer thought, an expanded thought. Same mind, just a less formulated, less construed, less limited experience of it, less formulated experience of it, a purer experience of it. So you could talk about expanded consciousness, purer consciousness, clearer consciousness, clearer thought, purer thought, a clearer mind, clearer thought, clearer, but it's all the same thing. In other words, nothing's changing other than the experience of it and the form of it. So you notice that the clearer someone's thought, the more formless it is. So you hear a lot of people talk about feeling and sense, and it's hard to talk about because their thinking's less formulated, so they have more of a direct flow or a direct feel. And as people's thinking gets more formulated, there's a lot more detail, but there tends to be a lot less substance to it, you know? So when someone has intuition, they don't come out with a bunch of reasons, because you're talking more or less formed, more or less restricted, more or less detailed. Which is why you can't figure out why you love someone. And the harder you think about it, the less you feel the love. Because love is an experience and a feeling of a clearer consciousness, a purer consciousness. And what's funny is, everybody feels this shift in the formlessness of it, the substance of it. Everybody feels it. So every client I've worked with, at some point they say, yeah, I know that feeling of when I'm really, either I know when I know, or I feel when I'm clear. It's hard to describe, but it's of substance. It's the same mind, but it's an experience through a clearer thought, and hence it's a clearer, more expanded consciousness of that mind. I don't know if that makes sense. What should we do, Corinne? Oh, bringing, okay.
You have some more, I think.
Yeah.
I forwarded one to you.
Yeah, go ahead, Corinne. Sorry, go on.
No, I forwarded one to you from someone that sent it to me privately, so I thought you might want to see.
Go on then. Go on then.
So, do you want me to read it, or you pick one?
No, I'm going to answer the business one, but I want you to read one. I want you to have a turn.
Ah, you want me to read one? I pick any one. I think you reply to most of the one I have. I have one from Gerredi that says, can you talk about how to handle thoughts that are classified by psychologists as OCD?
Oh, I did that one. I did that already. Yeah.
Okay. You did that one.
Yeah.
I think you did all the other ones I have.
Okay.
So if you reply to business.
Yeah, so I have a question which says, I'd like to hear about your experience bringing 3 principles to business people. How do you start? Do you do it informally? Is it scattered over time? Do people track indicators of change? Okay. I'm going to tell you what my experience is. You know how I called this talk Back to Basics? Well, my experience is that everything you need comes from a clearer understanding of these basic facts that we've been talking about, that life can be understood in terms of mind, consciousness, and thought. and that we can see and feel that that's the case. We can think that that's the case, but that's really neither here nor there, as we already looked at. Thought is just a formulation of something that's more of substance, and it's the more of substance that's important. So I found that the more I've thought about the principles, the less I've understood. And the more I've kind of not thought about it, or just kind of been in life, you're getting a direct feel that allows you to have insight into it. And that's been profoundly useful to me, because I was raised and I was a fairly committed intellectual. You know, now I'm only mildly committed intellectual. And intellect is really a use of the mind to take this power of mind, thought, and consciousness and play with it how you want to play with it. But it loses its relationship to an impersonal, universal intelligence at that point, and so it essentially becomes meaningless. So our intellectual thinking is meaningless because it's not attached to anything beyond ourselves. We're essentially detached the limbs from the head from the body, and it's no longer a functioning entity, which is why the more you think about the principles, the less you understand, because you're in your own head about it, and nothing exists in your own head. It's a complete make-believe world. There's no root to anything. And the power of what the principles point to is that we are life in action, so we have the ability to know. And actually, intuition, wisdom, gut feel are examples of ways in which people have a knowledge emerge in their consciousness through thought that they shouldn't really know. I've had people say, yeah, I had the thought slow down. I turned the corner and there was a deer in the road. Well, in the world, there's no way you could have any knowledge what's around the corner. Well, how could you get a feel for what's around the corner? Well, maybe the principles are right. We are an impersonal knowledge, the knowledge of everything, in experiencing that in the form of an individual human being, which is why you can know way more than you know. It's how you can understand. So when we say understand the principles more, please don't hear me saying go away and think about it or even go and study it. It's just being interested in a more fundamental, formless truth that you can have a sense of when all's said and done. And how sometimes you don't know what to do for an evening, and you think about it and you can't figure it out, and you stop thinking about it and it's obvious, just you know what makes sense. Well, that's a really trivial example of what I'm talking about. The principles are already there. It's there to be seen outside of all our personal use of thought, all our imaginings and analysis and all of that. So as you get more of a feel for the principles, which comes from knowing you don't ever really know, so you kind of keep an open mind to new insights and experiences, you get a more simple understanding. And my experience is working with businesses, which is an area where most people have lots of questions. As your understanding of what we're talking about increases, it looks more and more common sense, easy and natural how you would work with businesses. And I'm just going to share my view. You want to look at what you're doing. And what you're doing is, all right, put it this way. If you can see how an understanding of the principles is a fundamental requirement for doing business properly, you can work in businesses. If you don't see that, then you're going to have that insight first, because it will feel to you like you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. Now, that doesn't mean it is a square peg in a round hole. It means you don't yet have clarity how they fit together. And if you're interested in that, you will see it. And when you see it, you'll see exactly how to work with businesses. And if you see that an understanding of the principles is fundamental to doing business properly, right, then you realize, well, the only thing I need to do is help business people see that. And then the only question is, well, what's the best way of doing that in any given instance? Is it informally? Is it one-on-one? Is it in a group? Is it in a short period or a long period? And then you say to yourself, well, how do you know all these things? And then you say, well, I'm the same intelligence of all things that Aaron is. So I already know. I just haven't had the thought yet. And this goes back to that busy-minded question is, if you know you already know you haven't realized yet, it takes the pressure off. So you stop asking and thinking and wondering, and you start to, and outside of all that thinking, you start to get clarity, and things start to be one foot in front of the other, one grain of clarity at a time. And it's as important to know how wisdom works in the world, because that's how you know what to do. I guarantee you, if I told you exactly what I do and you followed it to the letter, it wouldn't work the way it works when I did it. I don't even do that. Because clarity comes from wisdom, truth, mind, I don't do what I do. I do what makes sense in a clear mind in the moment. Because life is a relationship to a potential truth, or life is a relationship to the potential behind life, or to the energy behind life, or to the clarity behind life, and it has to manifest in order to exist. And the level of clarity that you follow determines what happens in what you do. So anytime I've had an idea that was a little bit pressured or insecure, on paper it might have been the best idea in the world, or as good as the best idea in the world, but it doesn't work that way for me. And this is where the principles is back to basics, is we mistake life for a technical, material exercise, whereas actually it's an exercise of understanding how a formless, you could say spiritual, but that just means formless and fundamental and non-worldly, energy and potential comes to take form in the world, and our part in that through our relationship to thought. Thought throws up a varying quality of offering. Here's a fearful option. It looks like a menu of consciousness. And whatever we choose to use determines the quality of power of that energy we bring into the world in that instant. And you can watch it play out in any instant. You can totally watch it play out. If you want to see the future of what you're going to do, don't show me the plan, tell me the feeling. And I'll tell you how it'll play out. And the way I know that is it's that way in every instance in my life, every instance. The quality of consciousness, the quality of purity of energy, or the quality of purity of mind, thought, and consciousness, through which life is manifesting in me, absolutely determines what happens and where it goes and what comes out of it. It's a ripple. You're in the world, you're a source of energy in the world. It comes out in whatever thought, you act on whatever one you act on, that drops into the pond of life and the ripples come out. And it's the same in sports, business, relationships, parenting, tea making, cooking, cleaning up. And that's why the principles is so much more than a guide to a mental strategy. It's a description of the workings of life, and it's counterintuitive. You know how Sid said, as soon as an individual is born, and instead of seeing the manifestation of energy in consciousness as consciousness, they see a world, and they mistake their experience of being about that world. And instead of seeing mind, thought, and consciousness, the experience of this energy through thought in consciousness as the reality, they think the reality's out there, and they live a life as if that's true. And it can be very confusing. I did the right thing, but it didn't work out. I did my best, but it didn't work out. I wasn't really trying, but it worked out. And it's such a counterintuitive point that I'm usually quite circumspect about making it. But it came out before I had a chance to say anything. Yay, there's Dick McAtee and Jamie Sellers. Hi. Oh, all right. Do we have any unanswered questions? Does anyone have a question that they would like to ask before we go?
I don't have any sent to me, but if people want to, they can send directly to Aaron to presenter, and I will get straight to him.
I got a question.
Okay, right.
Hi, Jamie. Hi. I saw you. It was really nice to see you. Hi. The other thing I wanted to say, which sounds opposite to what I just said, but is exactly the same, is as well as if you go back to the basics of the principles, there's so many paradoxes. And one of the paradoxes is it sounds really out there, and people talk about it as spiritual, and the experiences that people talk about it sound like so unusual, and you know, like in a business context, until people get comfortable, you know, can make it sound a bit weird. But the truth is, it's every day too. It's absolutely every day. People are thinking all day, every day. They're experiencing their thought as reality all day, every day. They have complete freedom how they relate to that thought all day, every day. There's an unending wisdom and potential behind it all day, every day. They are that wisdom and potential all day, every day. And it's both profound, astounding, and simple. And that's the balance in carrying on learning, is like you get struck by the profundity and you can get a bit out there. And you get struck by the simplicity and you can kind of constrict it in your mind. And the beauty of the principles is if you go back to the drawing board on it, your understanding of it expands because there's more to it that you never realized. And that understanding that surprises, and some of them might be the simplicity of it, the normalcy of it, the profundity of it, the beauty of it, the touchingness of it, the humanity of it, the spirituality of it, the technicality of it. There's so much that you can keep going back to. And I guess what I would do is just encourage you to do that. It actually, the only real challenge I see for us in the world changing as a result of understanding these principles is that we get stuck in our understanding and say, I got it, I know what it is. And then all the potential goes out of it. It just becomes an idea, it just becomes a thought. And it's very easy to do that, particularly at the beginning. You know, because when you first learn something, you want to get your head around it. At least my clients do, and I'm pretty sure I did. I want to get my head around it. And you don't realize that, yes, it's very enabling and comforting to get your head around it, but you actually close down the future learning. Yeah. So I wanted to encourage you in that, you know, in a way, don't take anything I'm saying seriously, because you'll discover way more for yourself, because you are the same as me. You're learning that you're the same as me. You're able to see that you're the same. We're all the same. All exactly the same. And it's being willing to consider that we're all experiencing the same intelligence, power of mind, all the time, in nothing more than thought. And everyone's the same. Everyone's the same. Every client I've ever had, they tell me what their problem is, and it's like, well, yeah, doesn't everybody have that? And every problem they have is taking thought too seriously, taking a momentary reality too seriously, not realizing it's not real, or that the mind is much deeper than the momentary experience that you're having, or some version of that. And it's always a misunderstanding, not something they haven't done. Oh, you haven't had a quiet enough mind, or you haven't done this, or you haven't done that, or you've hung on to it too long. None of that matters if you understand it. It doesn't matter if you hang on to thought, if you know it's thought. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have a busy mind, if you know it's just thought. It doesn't matter. I mean, it matters to your experience, but if a busy mind is not the real mind, it's not gonna, it doesn't change anything, and it's completely unsustainable. Like, you couldn't keep a busy mind if you wanted to. I had lots of clients that say, I have a busy mind and I can't stop, I don't know what to do. But once we start talking, they can pinpoint loads of times in their life where they're just willing to just leave their mind alone, and they're perfectly mentally healthy, and they're rested and inspired, comfortable. Everybody's that way. You're not going to find an exception, because all of life is the same thing in a different form. And that's what we're having an open mind to, because it definitely doesn't look that way. And it definitely doesn't feel that way. I had a client on a weekend with a business group last week, and she pulled me aside and she said, you're wrong. You're wrong, that we are not experiencing thought. We're experiencing other people. I said, well, how do you know? She said, well, that's exactly what it feels like. I said, well, are you open to the fact that the way it is might be different from the way it feels? And she says, well, you're wrong. I said, I don't want you to tell me if I'm wrong or not. I know we're saying something different. You think feelings come from other people. I think feelings come from the mind. But the question is, are you open to considering that even though it feels like it comes from other people, it might not work that way? And she argued with me for 5 minutes. And here's what's fascinating. As soon as she said, yeah, I am open to it, she calmed way down. And within 5 seconds, the next thing that she said is, oh, this is really interesting, isn't it? And I can see this, and I can see that, and that makes sense. And then she just learned for the whole rest of the time without any input from me, because it was all there to be seen. But it was just hanging on to an idea of reality that stopped us from seeing something that was clearer, that was more truer.
Thank you, Aaron.
No, it's a real pleasure. It's a real pleasure. I really didn't know what we would talk about. I hope it's been useful for everybody. It's been very interesting for me. I got one more question, and I hope the questions were, people got their questions answered. It was a pleasure to meet you all. If any of you live in England, it would be nice to see you at the conference in May 11th, 12th, and 13th, 3pconference.org. And if you do come, I would love to meet you, so please introduce yourself. And nice to see you there, Dick. It's been too long.
I don't think we have any more questions, Aaron, so we might wrap up if you want to say the words to finish. Or, yeah?
Yeah, no, that seems fine.
Okay.
We could just wait for 4 minutes until we're allowed to finish.
I mean, we can finish. Okay. I want just to say thank you, and I'm sure everybody will join me to say thank you for answering all those questions, and it was really, really good. And next month we have Josh Stransky, so we'd be happy to just have you on the call too.
Great.
So thank you so much, Aaron, for all you shared. And
yeah.
Bye to everybody, and see you next month.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Aaron.
Bye. Thank you, Corinne. Bye.